The zipper of the tent flap rasped open like a gunshot in the dead of night, and John froze, his heart slamming against his ribs as Christopher's silhouette loomed against the star-pricked sky. "I can't do this alone anymore," Christopher whispered, his voice cracking like thin ice underfoot, eyes wild with a desperation that mirrored the storm brewing over the Rockies. In that instant, as hail pelted the nylon roof like accusatory whispers, John knew one truth. The line they'd towed for years was about to snap, and there'd be no going back from the abyss. John had always been the steady one, the guy who fixed flat tires on backcountry roads and cracked jokes to defuse bar fights in dive joints from Denver to Durango. At 28, he was a park ranger with calloused hands from hauling gear up sheer granite faces. His life a rhythm of seasonal wildfires and quiet evenings nursing a Coors by the campfire. Christopher, Chris to everyone but John, who sometimes let Kit slip out in unguarded moments, was the wildfire itself. 26, a freelance photographer chasing light across the American West, his camera slung like a talisman around his neck, capturing the raw bleed of sunsets over Red Rock canyons. They'd met 5 years back at a music festival in Telluride, bonding over stolen sips of whiskey and a shared disdain for the trust fund kids slumming it in flannel. Friendship had bloomed easy as wildflowers after a spring rain, road trips through Utah's slot canyons, late-night bull sessions about everything from Kerouac to quantum physics. But lately, the air between them hummed with something unnamed, electric as the static before a thunderstorm. This trip was supposed to be a reset. Chris had shown up at John's cabin unannounced 2 weeks ago, hollow-eyed and chain-smoking Camels on the porch, fresh off a brutal breakup with his girlfriend of 2 years, Lena. "She called me a ghost," he'd said, flicking ash into the wind. Said I was never really there. John hadn't pressed. Instead, he'd suggested they hit the trails in Rocky Mountain National Park. Just the two of them, no cell service, no distractions. A week of hauling packs through aspen groves, fishing cutthroat trout in glassy streams, and forgetting the world's bullshit. By day 3, as they crested a ridge overlooking Emerald Lake, the autumn aspens ablaze in gold and crimson, John caught Chris staring, not at the view, but at him. The look lingered a beat too long, heavy with questions neither dared voice. That night, the temperature plummeted to 20 degrees, the kind of bone chill that seeped through thermals and turned breath to frost. Their tents, John's a reliable 2-person North Face, Chris's a leaky REI knockoff, stood side by side in a sheltered hollow below Hallett Peak. John was burrowed deep in his bag, wool socks pulled high, when the hail started. Ping 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 against the fly, escalating to a roar that drowned out the wind's howl. Then, the zipper. Chris, teeth chattering, his sleeping bag sodden from a seam split earlier that day. "Jesus, man, get in here before you turn into a popsicle," John muttered, scooting over without thinking. The tent was barely big enough for one, let alone 2 grown men, but chivalry or whatever this was demanded it. Chris crawled in, shedding his wet jacket, the scent of pine sap and damp wool filling the space. They lay head to foot at first, rigid as fence posts, the hail a relentless drumbeat overhead. But the cold was merciless, clawing at exposed skin, and inch by inch, necessity won. Chris twisted, his back to John's front, and John draped an arm over, not quite a hug, just survival. The shared body heat was immediate, a bloom of warmth in the frozen dark. It was then, as the storm peaked and the world outside blurred to white noise, that Chris shifted. Not much, a press of hip against thigh, deliberate yet trembling. John's breath hitched, his mind flashing to fragmented memories. Chris's laugh echoing off Zion's sandstone walls, the accidental brush of fingers over a shared joint at a bonfire in Moab. The way Chris's eyes softened when John talked about his dead dad, the Vietnam vet who'd offed himself in a garage haze of Pabst and regret. John's own history was a closet door half-cracked, flings with women in college that felt scripted, a drunken fumble with a guy at a VFW hall that he'd buried under layers of denial. He wasn't. He couldn't be. But Chris's body, solid and yielding, ignited something primal, a spark to dry tinder. "John," Chris murmured, voice muffled against the pillow of his arm. "You ever wonder if we're just pretending?" The words hung, fragile as the first snowflake. John's pulse thundered in his ears. He could pull away, laugh it off as hypothermia talking. Instead, he tightened his hold, lips brushing the nape of Chris's neck in a ghost of a kiss. "Every damn day," he admitted, the confession ripping free like a belay rope fraying mid-climb. What followed was no frantic tangle of limbs, no porn script frenzy. It was tentative, exploratory, a hand tracing the ridge of a collarbone, breaths sinking in the confines of the bag, the hail fading to a patter as if the storm itself held its breath. Chris turned, their faces inches apart, and in the faint glow of a headlamp forgotten on low, John saw the map of uncertainties etched in Chris's features. The faint scar from a skateboarding wipeout in Boulder, the perpetual 5 o'clock shadow that Lena used to tease him about. Their mouths met, soft at first, then deepening with the urgency of withheld truths. Hands roamed under layers, fingers splaying across a chest dusted with hair, thumbs circling hips, eliciting gasps that fogged the air. It wasn't just release. It was revelation, the unspooling of a lifetime's guarded heart. Dawn crept in gray and unforgiving, the tent a cocoon of tangled limbs and shed inhibitions. John woke first, Chris's head pillowed on his chest, the steady rise and fall a rhythm he'd kill to preserve. For a stolen hour, they lingered in that limbo, trading lazy kisses and whispers about futures that felt possible for the first time. Maybe a cabin in the San Juans, Chris's photos on gallery walls in Santa Fe, John's ranger badge traded for something freer. But reality intruded with the crackle of John's radio, summoning him to a search and rescue call, overdue hikers on the Continental Divide. Duty pulled him out, but not before he cupped Chris's face, murmuring, "This isn't a one-off. You know that, right?" Chris nodded, eyes shadowed. "Yeah. But Lena, she's texting nonstop. I haven't told her yet." The mention landed like a rock slide, but John swallowed the jealousy, forcing a grin. "One avalanche at a time, Kit." The days blurred into a haze of stolen moments, quick fumbles behind lodgepole pines during lunch breaks, Chris's camera capturing John's profile against a bison herd at dusk, their laughter echoing freer than before. Back in civilization, they navigated the minefield of secrecy, Chris crashing at John's place in Estes Park, doors locked against prying eyes, the queen bed becoming their sanctuary. John introduced Chris to his ragtag crew of rangers and locals at the Silver Dollar Saloon, watching with a possessive thrill as Chris charmed them with tales of chasing auroras in Alaska. For the first time, John felt anchored, not adrift in the vastness of the West, but cracks spiderwebbed beneath the surface. Chris's phone buzzed incessantly. Lena, his sister, old climbing buddies. He'd silence it, but John saw the guilt etching lines around his eyes. One night, over takeout pho from that hole-in-the-wall on El Dorado Springs Drive, Chris broke. "I love you," he said abruptly, chopsticks frozen mid-air. "Not like friends. Like this." John's world tilted, joy warring with terror. "I love you too," he echoed, the words tasting of liberation. They made love that night with a ferocity born of naming the unspoken, bodies mapping promises in the dim lamplight. Yet love, in its raw American grit, doesn't come gift-wrapped. The betrayal brewed slow, a poison seeping from the past. Lena, sensing the shift, drove up from Denver unannounced, her Subaru crunching gravel into John's driveway like an accusation. She was all sharp edges and designer jeans, the kind of woman who'd backpack Europe on daddy's dime and post it on Instagram with wanderlust. John answered the door, shirt rumpled from a nap, Chris's hoodie slung over the couch like incriminating evidence. "Where's Kit?" she demanded, pushing past with the entitlement of the unbroken. John stammered something about a photo shoot, but she was already inside, nostrils flaring at the scent of Chris's cologne mingling with John's aftershave. Chris arrived 20 minutes later, camera bag thumping against his thigh, and the air thickened to molasses. Lena's eyes narrowed at the casual arm Chris draped over John's shoulder, a habit now, unthinking. "What's going on here?" she hissed. Once John tactfully bailed to check the truck, Chris crumbled, the truth spilling in a torrent. The breakup texts he drafted but never sent, the sleeping bag epiphany, the way John's touch had rewritten his compass. Lena's face twisted, hurt morphing to fury. "You're fucking the help?" she spat, voice venomous. "My boyfriend's turning fag with some redneck ranger?" The slur landed like a sucker punch, but Chris fired back, defending John with a fierceness that bordered on violence. She stormed out, tires squealing into the twilight, but not before vowing revenge. "I'll tell everyone. Your family, your clients. Everyone in Boulder will know what a pervert you are." The fallout hit like a Category 5. Whispers rippled through their circles. Chris's gigs dried up, galleries ghosting his emails. John's co-workers shot sidelong glances at the station, the easy ribbing turning to awkward silences. Chris's parents, conservative Catholics from a suburb outside Chicago who'd relocated to Arizona for retirement, called in a frosty rage, quoting Leviticus like it was gospel law. John's mom, a widow scraping by on Social Security in a trailer park near Fort Collins, sent a terse email. "Proud of you, son. But be careful out there." It was the closest she'd come to acceptance, her own youth scarred by her husband's demons. In the eye of the storm, they clung tighter. Nights blurred into marathons of takeout and Tarantino flicks, Chris's head in John's lap as they dissected the world's cruelties. But the pressure mounted, a fault line straining. Chris started drinking heavier, Jack Daniel's straight from the bottle, the amber liquid a balm for the isolation. John found him one dawn on the cabin porch, staring at the front range as if it held answers, a half-empty pack of smokes at his feet. "I can't breathe here anymore," Chris admitted, voice raw. "It's like the mountains are closing in." John's heart fractured. "Then we'll go. Alaska, the Keys, anywhere." But Chris shook his head, eyes distant. "It's not the place. It's me. I dragged you into this mess." The guilt was a thief, stealing their light piece by piece. The high point, the summit they never saw coming, unfolded on All Saints' Eve, the veil between worlds thin as onion skin. They'd driven to a hot spring soak-off Trail Ridge Road, the kind of spot locals guarded like buried treasure. Steaming pools cradled in granite basins, steam rising like spirits into the starlit vault. Stripped bare under the chill, they slipped into the water, the heat a mercy on battered souls. For hours, they floated, bodies entwined, the Milky Way a river overhead. Chris traced constellations on John's skin, naming them anew. John's scar from a bear encounter became Orion's belt, his laugh lines the Big Dipper's curve. "You're my North Star," Chris whispered, and John believed it, the words sealing a vow in vapor. But dawn brought the deluge. A ranger buddy of John's, buzzed on cheap beer at a Halloween bash in Grand Lake, let slip the rumor mill's latest grind. Lena had hooked up with a mutual friend, a climber named Tate, and in her pillow talk, she'd outed Chris not just to their circle, but to his biggest client, a National Geographic stringer who'd blackballed him industry-wide. Worse, Tate, jealous and spiteful, had cornered John at the bar earlier, slurring, "Heard your boy's got a taste for dick now. Hope you don't catch anything from that city trash." The confrontation replayed in John's mind as they hiked back, the trail a gauntlet of golden leaves turning to rot underfoot. By midday, they were back at the cabin, the argument erupting like a geyser. "You should have told me about Lena's bullshit sooner," John roared, slamming a fist into the pine wall, splintering the knotty grain. Chris recoiled, eyes flashing. "And what? Let you play martyr? This is my fault. I led her on. Pretended for years because I was too chicken shit to face it." The words escalated. Barbs honed on fear. John's accusations of cowardice. Chris's retorts about John's closet-deep denial. It peaked with Chris hurling his camera, a Nikon he'd babied like a child, against the stone hearth, the lens shattering like their illusions. In the wreckage, silence fell heavy. John sank to the floor, back against the cold slate, tears carving tracks through the dust on his cheeks. Chris joined him, knees drawn up, the space between them a chasm bridged only by trembling fingers. "I can't lose you," John choked out, the admission a dam breaking. Chris crawled into his lap, burying his face in John's neck. "Then don't let go." They held on as the afternoon waned, the argument's embers cooling to something tender, a recommitment forged in fire. Winter clamped down hard that year, blanketing the Rockies in feet of powder, turning roads to treacherous veins of ice. Isolation became ally and enemy, nights of slow, reverent lovemaking by the wood stove, John's hands learning the topography of Chris's body like a beloved trail, days of cabin fever, where old habits resurfaced in passive-aggressive jabs over who forgot to salt the ice or restock the coffee. John's shifts at the park kept him grounded, patrolling snowshoe trails and rescuing stranded skiers, the routine a tether to normalcy. Chris, cut off from work, tinkered with salvaged film rolls, developing prints in a makeshift darkroom in the shed, images of their shared wilds emerging like ghosts. A silhouette of John against a thunderstorm in Arches, Chris's grin mid-leap off a cliff in Joshua Tree. Redemption whispered in small graces. John's mom drove up for Christmas, her ancient Chevy groaning under a load of tamales and skepticism. She took one look at Chris, flannel-clad, chopping wood with awkward swings and arched a brow. Over spiked eggnog, she grilled him gently. "You make my boy smile like I haven't seen since he was knee-high to a grasshopper." Chris flushed, mumbling about the light in Colorado, but her pat on his knee sealed an unspoken pact. Later, Alone with John, she pressed a faded photo into his hand. Their family, pre-loss, all grins and no shadows. Love's a risk, Mijo. But it's the only thing worth freezing your ass off for. Spring thawed the impasse. Chris landed a gig shooting for a queer indie mag out of Portland, portraits of out and proud folks in flyover states. A balm to his wounded pride. The assignment took him east for a month. A trial by distance that tested their fragile weave. Letters, actual ink on paper, postmarked from motels in Nebraska, filled the gap. Chris's scrawled musings on cornfield sunrises, John's typed confessions of missing the weight of him in bed. When Chris returned, leaner and sun-kissed, they met at DIA. The airport bustle a cacophony around their reunion kiss, brief, but defiant, drawing stares they ignored. The true climax crested that July 4th, under a sky fractured by fireworks over Boulder Reservoir. They joined a flotilla of kayaks and rafts, beers cracking open as the first booms lit the night. Chris, buoyant on adrenaline, proposed a toast. To us, the fuckers who survived. Laughter rippled, but John's gaze snagged on a familiar face across the water. Lena, arm in arm with Tate, her laugh brittle as spun glass. Fate, or pettiness, conspired, their raft drifted close, waves from a passing speedboat sloshing them together. The collision was inevitable. Lena's eyes locked on Chris, then John, the old venom flaring. "Look what the cat dragged in," she sneered, loud enough for nearby partiers to perk up. Tate chuckled, slinging an arm around her. "Still playing house. Boys," the slur hung, igniting the powder keg. Chris surged forward, water slopping over the gunnels, but John held him back, voice steel. "Walk away, Lena. Your poison's old news." She didn't. Instead, she unloaded, a vitriolic spew of betrayals, painting Chris as the villain who'd strung her along, John as the opportunistic redneck poaching her man. The crowd murmured, phones emerging like vultures. Chris's face drained of color, the old shame resurfacing. But John who'd stared down grizzlies and avalanches, stood. "You want the truth?" he bellowed, voice carrying over the pops and whistles. "Yeah, we're together. Gay as hell, and twice the people you'll ever be. So take your small-town bigotry and choke on it." Silence blanketed the water, then applause, scattered at first, swelling from allies in the flotilla, queer folks and straight ones who'd had enough. Lena deflated, Tate towing her away in sullen retreat. Chris turned to John, awestruck. "You did that. For me." John pulled him close, the raft rocking gently. "For us." In the afterglow, as fireworks painted the sky in defiant bursts, they made a pact, no more hiding. Chris pitched a series to a Denver alt weekly, intimate shots of LGBTQ+ lives in the heartland, starting with their story, raw and unfiltered. John quit the ranger gig for a gig guiding queer adventure tours, trading badge for authenticity. They bought a fixer-upper A-frame in Nederland, high in the foothills, where elk bugled at dawn and the air tasted of pine and possibility. Years later, on the anniversary of that hailstorm night, they'd return to the same hollow below Hallett Peak. The tent long replaced by a sturdy glamping setup, Chris's touch. All fairy lights and memory foam, they'd unzip the bag not for warmth, but ritual. Pressed close, breaths mingling, John would murmur, "Nothing's the same, and everything's better." Chris, ever the dreamer, would counter, Damn right. And we're just getting started. In the end, it wasn't a fairy tale. No princes, no glass slippers. Just two men, scarred by betrayal and tempered by love, carving a path through the American wild. Human, flawed, unbreakable. The mountains stood sentinel, eternal witnesses to the quiet revolution of hearts laid bare.